So don't get defensive. I know that our immediate reaction is to get defensive whenever our spouse calls us out about something, but they know us the best. And so we need to recognize that their feedback is something to take in consideration. So if our spouse is saying, hey, you probably should work out more or be concerned about your health, don't just blow them off. Their feedback is so valuable, probably the most valuable feedback you can get.
And never expect more from your spouse than you're willing to give. Don't say, hey, you probably should go work out if you don't work out yourself.
Do not do that.
So do not expect more from your spouse than you're willing to give.
Yes.
Welcome to the Four Fires Podcast, where we talk about winning in all four of the essential areas of life.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Four Fires Podcast. Today, I am joined by my lovely wife, Rachel, and we're going to be talking about how the Four Fires and living intentionally has impacted our marriage. Rachel, it's good to have you back. You've been on the podcast before, so give us a short intro of who you are and anything we need to know about you.
Yeah, so I'm Rachel Rice, married to my wonderful husband. So I'm a national certified counselor. I'm going to work in the school setting, and I'm also a certified nutrition coach working with women and men to look and feel their best year round, and I absolutely love that. It's one of my biggest passions, as you know, and you hear me talk about it 24/7. And I love just being married to you, and so that's why I'm so excited to be on this podcast with you and talk the nitty-gritty of marriage and being vulnerable about just different aspects of our marriage, and I'm excited.
Yeah.
So we are an open book.
Yeah. So we're both 24 years old. We've been married for almost 3 years. June 19th of 2024 will be 3 years.
So we're definitely experts on marriage, obviously.
We've learned a lot
Just kidding.
in 3 years, but we got a long way to go, and we've only gotten to where we are now because of a great framework, a great direction for our life, and great, godly, wise counsel. A lot of really great couples in our lives that are 1, 2, 3, and maybe getting close to 4 decades older than us. So a lot of other people that have poured into us to help us grow as much as we have in the last 3 years. So, Rachel, I'm actually going to let you start us off. Just hit some high-level stuff explaining a little bit about our relationship from the time we met to started dating, getting engaged, and then into marriage. And then, of course, the most valuable stuff I think that we're going to talk about is what we've learned since we've been married. So why don't you give us a little story behind dating and being engaged? Yeah,
so we'll give the broad spectrum of things and the highlights for the general parts of our marriage, but then we'll spend more time on the more nitty-gritty parts of our marriage that really change things. So before we started dating, we really didn't date that much. In high school, even college, we met freshman year, praise God. So we didn't go so long in college without meeting each other. We met first semester freshman year at the end of October. And that October, I remember going to Point, and I had met, I thought, all the guys. I'd seen Jeff before, but I was like, ugh, baseball player. Sorry to all the baseball players, but I definitely had that thought, just being honest. But, so I knew who Jeff was, but I was just baseball player, whatever. And so I thought I met all the guys at Point, and I just remember praying all right, Lord, I have met every single guy here. None are my husband. I guess I'm just going to meet my husband in the workplace one day. Which kind of made me sad, but I was like, well, I'm not going to settle. I ain't settled this whole time. Now is not the time.
Definitely, wow, you're not having much faith. And I guess you weren't thinking about transfers or something. You didn't meet everybody freshman year, and then there's 3 more years, or even it could have been after Christmas freshman year that somebody transferred, that I maybe transferred in, and you got to meet me. So a little bit of a small thinking. So anyone out there that's in college, feel like you have no chance of meeting your spouse since you've met everybody, don't think so small. Anyway, continue.
There's hope. Yeah, don't be small-minded like me. So I just remember that fall, I played volleyball in college, and you played baseball, and so I was prime volleyball season freshman year, and I went home for a weekend, and I remember being in the TJ Maxx parking lot, just like, all right, God, I have none of the guys here are my husband, so I'm just going to start praying for my future husband. And I remember praying through like this list that I found online of like praying through your mind, your thoughts, your eyes, the things that you're doing, like just your family, like every part of your life. I just remember praying over, and then legitimately, and this is classic for people to say this, like, oh, and then he appeared, but for real, like you appeared the next week. And where did we met at a campus ministry event called Feast at Point, and they had a bonfire, and so we were standing around the bonfire, and here's Jeff, who I'm thinking, whatever.
She said, "Oh, he's cute."
Yeah, I remember thinking he was cute, and I was like, "Oh, he's at a Feast event," so which was the campus ministry. So that's another thing. Do not go to the clubs or the bar. Like you're
looking for your spouse.
You're not gonna find like your spouse at Sky Bar if you live in Auburn. Like, sorry. I mean, you might, I guess, but like go to the places that the person you're looking for could be at. So whether that's a gym, a church event, a good community, go to those places to find your person. So anyways, you were standing around the bonfire at this campus ministry event. So you already got more brownie points because I was like, all right, he's at a ministry event. Could be potential. Yeah. I might take back my thoughts about you. Anyways, we started talking, hit it off. So I prayed for him, and little did I know, behind the scenes the week before, which was the same exact time that I was in the TJ Maxx parking lot praying for you, you were praying for me. And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So the whole month of September, I remember I got a book called, it was actually recommended to me from my sister Shelby. She was going through 31 prayers for my future husband, and then there was the other book on Amazon, 31 prayers for my future wife. So she was like, hey, I'm going through this. Maybe you want to buy. I just shared with her, I'm kind of frustrated. I thought I told her that I was ready to meet someone. I don't guess I was frustrated of like, oh man, well, I guess I'm never going to get married since I didn't meet my wife in the first month of college. But just told her had a conversation with her, said I was ready to meet my wife. So she was like, hey, why don't you go through this book? So I bought it on Amazon. So for the whole month of September, I went through those 31 prayers for my future wife. And then same thing, similar story. It was like as soon as I finished, I guess I started it maybe halfway through September because I finished it then, I guess, in mid-October because we met October 22nd. And because it seemed like as soon as I finished going through the book, I met you. Mm-hmm. And
y'all, he gave me that book of prayers on our honeymoon night, and it was the sweetest thing I've ever seen because he had written all those prayers right before he even met me. And it was just so cool reading through that. Basically, we continue our relationship, and we were inseparable, if you knew us. Like, we were always together. We were always laughing, staying up way too late also, like way too late, just to be together because we didn't want to not be together 24/7. And so we pretty much had a great relationship. We dated for a year and a half, but probably about 8 months in, going back previously, before we started dating, he had told me about a struggle with a porn addiction. That was in high school. And I guess I was naive. I was like, he's a good guy. Like, nobody struggles with that.
Let's talk about, we had a small group with us and a bunch of our friends. And one of the guys who led the small group one week made a comment about 1 in 3 guys struggle with pornography. And Rachel and one of her good female friends was like, oh, no, that's crazy. Rachel said, do you think Jeff struggles with it? And then she asked, do you think my boyfriend struggles with it?
We were like, nah.
And they were like, no, there's no way they struggle with it. So then later that night, Rachel, we were sitting in her car outside of my dorm where I lived at Point, and that conversation came up from just an hour earlier at small group, and I was like, well, I would say 1 in 1 guys struggle with porn, or at least have looked at pornography. And she was like, what? So then she was like, have you? So then I just, and by the way, we weren't even dating at this point.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to lie to her. I was like, yeah, I did in high school. And even at that time, I was still looking at it every once in a while, but it wasn't a full-on addiction like it was in high school. Like high school, it was as much of an addiction as anything anyone had ever seen, I guess. I mean, it was every single day. So, and that's something that I know a lot of men struggle with. So tell your story from there. Where did you go after you found out? What was your reaction after you found that out?
Well, I was shook because I guess I was just naive, and I was like, oh, he's a great guy. There's no way he struggles with that. So I was very surprised. But you had told me that, and then you said, I think this was around December of freshman year, and you were like, but my New Year's resolution or whatever was, I'm not going to look at it anymore. Like, I'm done. And so you made that your New Year's resolution, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I guess he's done struggling with it, whatever. And so, anyways, we start officially dating that January.
Well, we've kind of forgot to mention this, too. This is my advice, too, for anyone out there is when you meet the person you'd like to start dating, prolong asking them to be your girlfriend. So for guys that they're going to be asking a girl to be their girlfriend, prolong that at least a little bit. So Rachel and I became best friends for 3 months before we started dating. So we met October 22nd. It was close to 3 months. October, November, December, and then January 13th, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and I think that's one of the greatest things that we experienced in our relationship was we really just became best friends. I never even kissed her until the night I asked her to be my girlfriend. In fact, she was getting ready to say, "Get out of here, boy."
I was getting a little impatient,
she was like,
to
Dude,
be honest.
Are you ever going to ask me to be your girlfriend? So that's something I recommend too, is become best friends with the person that you would like to start dating and you think might turn into your spouse one day, because when you get married, you still need to be best friends.
Yes.
And you need to be best friends forever.
Yes. So we were besties for the resties all through, for months and months. So I think about 8 or 9 months had gone by since that conversation about the porn. And so I was like, oh, he must be chilling. He's fine. Hasn't looked at it. And one day I just remember thinking about it or something. And I just asked you, I was like, hey, you still good with porn? Right. You're still clean from it. And he just broke down. And
because I made it my New Year's resolution, no pornography. So from January all the way until I think that was October.
Maybe.
When we had that conversation and you just straight up asked me, hey, how are you doing? Have you looked at pornography? I had gone from January all the way until September. So I had just looked at it again 2 weeks before she asked me. And I was I was so depressed that I had fallen back into it just one time.
No, it was twice, wasn't it?
It was 2 times that week. And then I was like, what the heck am I doing? So then from 2 weeks, I was clean again. But then I was like, wow. I was like, so all of this time, and then she asks me just 2 weeks after I had gone back into it. But from January until September, I hadn't looked at anything. I was doing so good. So then at that night, like she said, I broke down and...
Yeah, so he told me that, and I totally thought he was chilling with porn, didn't look at it, anything like that. And when he was except for the week before, and I was distraught. I didn't know what to do. I was like, do I break up with him? He's my best friend, and I wanted to marry you. I mean, gosh, we both didn't barely date because we're like, nah, they're not the one. So we were so picky. And so I wanted to marry you, but I was distraught about the whole thing, truly to my core. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I just looked at him and I was like, I want you to be my husband, but my husband will not do this. And if you continue to do this, you're not my husband. And that just came out of me, and I meant it too. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is not okay. And I said, in fact, you looking at it again and feeling sorry and crying, I'm done with that. Like, this is, and not to be a savage, but when you're dating, be a savage, women, okay? Because you can be. And I was like, my husband's not going to do that. You're not my husband if you do that. And also, I don't want to have this conversation again, because I'm not going to go the back and forth of, oh, we looked at it again, cry fest, so sorry, apologize, move on. I'm not going to do that cycle multiple times. Like, I'm not going to go through this again. So I was like, I'm not having this conversation again, period. Yep. We're not doing this.
Yeah. So that night, I remember, like she said, so you should know, everyone listening, that I'm an emotional guy, so it's not a giant, it's not a big thing really for me to cry. However, that night I like broke down crying because I immediately thought, oh my gosh, I want to marry this girl, and she's about to break up with me, and I'm about to lose this girl that I thought was going to be my wife. So that night, in my room, in my dorm, I went online, and I had heard about two different, I guess, online accountability partners, I guess, for pornography, and one of them was Covenant Eyes. And so if you guys have never heard of Covenant Eyes, and that's both male and female, because I know men statistically struggle more with pornography, but even women, if you're struggling with it, and as parents, we don't have kids yet, but our whole family is definitely going to have Covenant Eyes. And so what it is it changes your web browser. And so I have to, everything I search to this day, I search through the Covenant Eyes web browser and not the normal Safari web browser. And I have it on my cell phone and my computer, and so there's no way for me to look anything up without Rachel knowing about it. And so that night I got Covenant Eyes, and I recommend getting another accountability partner. I know me and some other people may disagree on this, but I made Rachel I put Rachel every single day from that night, October or November of 2019, and from that night until today. Rachel's gotten an email every single day with screenshots or any concerning data or searches that has happened on my phone. And so I immediately got that night because I was serious about, okay, I legitimately have to stop this, because even though I've only looked at it twice this whole year, I see how this is going to wreck my relationship with what I thought at the time and turned out to be my future wife. So I did that night, so I highly recommend any guys or girls out there to look at Covenant Eyes. There's a couple of different ones out there, but Covenant Eyes is a great one, and you can add as many partners as you want to hold you accountable. And so some people will say, no, I wouldn't recommend put your wife. I did. It worked out great in that situation. Some people will recommend, put your best friend, put another man in your life. But the person that I am concerned most with hurting is Rachel, and then God, of course. But if there's going to be somebody that knows, I wanted to go straight to Rachel. So, there's just nothing for me to hide. So that's what I did that night, and then I guess you can pick it back up from there.
Yeah, so that let me know that you were serious about changing. Like, if you kind of just let it go and be like, yeah, I'll try not to look at it again. I don't know if I could have been okay with that answer. But literally that night, you had Covenant Eyes already downloaded on there. The email's already signed up to go to me, which, again, if you don't want it to go to your wife or whoever, that's totally fine. But you put me as it, and I was like, okay, dang, all right. You're serious. And so that gave me peace of mind moving forward. And it's only $16.99 a month. So we still pay for Covenant Eyes. And you said, this is more than worth it. Just
heck yeah.
Because it doesn't even allow you, I'm going to see it if you look at something. And so that gave me peace of mind just moving forward into marriage, because you don't want, no matter what the addiction is or whatever the sin or situation is, you don't want that brought into marriage, because that would suck and just cause a lot more problems. And so that's what I didn't want for our marriage. And thank you for doing that, because it just really, I honor you for doing that, truly, because it really let me see the kind of man that I was marrying, that you're willing to make those positive changes right away.
So then We dated for that was about 9 months or so, 10 months into, I guess it was 10 months at least into dating, and then we continued to date all the way until the next summer, so the summer of 2020, and I proposed in July. I don't even remember the date.
July 25th. It's fine.
The one that's important is the wedding, right? I don't have to remember the day I proposed. I do remember the day we met and the day we started dating.
Yeah.
But I proposed July of 2020. That fall, we started premarital counseling. So let's talk a little bit about what we got out of premarital counseling.
So we were engaged for 11 and a half months, which I don't recommend. I would say 7 months is solid for an engagement,
I think
if you ask me.
1 month is solid.
No, because you need time to plan, but that's just how it was because he played baseball, I played volleyball. We had to be engaged almost a year. That's fine. So the reason we say 11 and a half months is too long is because it's hard to stay pure for that long. And we had made it a year and a half of dating and 6 months into engagement. Mm-hmm. And then we had sex. And I was distraught beyond belief because I was like, oh, for sure we're making it. Like, whatever. We've made it this long. We'll make it. And we didn't. And I, like, had panic attacks about it. It was so, like, I was depressed. It was such a hard time because I was just so depressed that we didn't make it. And so we went through and we really tried to continue back on the path of purity over that next 6 months, but it was really hard and we struggled a few times. But especially the last, I would say 6 weeks or 2 months before we got married, I was like, do not freaking put your pinky on me. Do not touch me because this gives me panic attacks. So we're going to be pure until marriage. Uh-huh. So then we kind of reversed that and then got married and it was so wonderful. And then we got married.
Well, I want to talk about a couple things that we got out of premarital counseling. And so one of the things that I really got out of premarital counseling was the idea of choosing happiness. So the idea of choosing happiness really stuck out to me in premarital counseling, and then even today I recognize how important and how profound that was at that time, and it's so important because my wife and I could choose. Well, let me say this. What I found is that whatever you focus on is what you get, and when you focus on all the negative things that your spouse does, you're always going to see, when you're always wanting to tell your spouse all the things that they do wrong, that's all you're going to see. It's like riding a bike. If you're riding a bike and you turn your head hard to the left, before you know it, you're going to start going to the left and probably wreck into something. And so the idea of choose happiness is so important because even on the days when Rachel's doing all the little things that annoy me, or I'm doing all the little things that annoy her, me choosing to be happy and just choosing that attitude of gratitude that we have a great life. You are the joy of my life. I love you so much, and you're my best friend. That's so important. Another thing with that helps with choosing happiness is this idea of having positive withholds. The idea of positive withholds is you notice that your spouse does something or they said something, you're in a public place, you're at a party or something, and something as simple as I see Rachel flick her hair and her eyes sparkle in the light and I think she looks beautiful, and I'm not able to tell her that right then and there because she's talking with somebody or something. Later on, you say, hey babe, earlier tonight you did this and I really loved it. You look so beautiful. And so that's a positive withhold. And so making an effort to give your spouse positive withholds, telling them something positive about them that they did or said in the past, is just a great way to communicate, hey, I notice you and I see you and you're beautiful and you're so sweet, and whatever else the positive compliment is. But then the rule of thumb is when you're thinking about giving anything negative, because it's a marriage, we have to work on it, so it's important for us to communicate things that maybe we're not happy with, or even just little things that annoy us. Hey, can you do better with this? Every time you want to say something negative, call it complaining or some kind of critique, which can be okay. You should have 2 positive things to say, 2 or more positive things to say. So and that's the whole, it all goes into choosing happiness. And if you value your marriage, you'll choose to compliment your spouse more than you critique them. And then one last thing that I really got out of premarital counseling was this idea of your marriage should be not a capital A or a capital M, or it should be a capital H. And so for those of you that are just listening, don't have the video overlaid, think about a capital A, the letter A, and how it's got the two long parts of the letter and leaning in on each other, and then there's the bridge in between holding it together. And that's the idea there, is you and your spouse are leaning on each other, and if one of you weren't there, you would fall.
You're too dependent
on each other. So you don't want your marriage to be represented by a capital A. And the capital M is a little bit less so, but you're still, if you draw a capital M, the 2 sides of the letter are still leaning against each other. It's better than the A, but you're still pretty much dependent. And if your spouse isn't there, you crumble and you're just not independent. You're not happy on your own. But the ideal is to be a capital H, where you are 2 strong individuals that come together and join together in Christ, and you are stronger together. So that was a cool picture for me. I'm very visual. I wanted to share that. It's just don't be an A, don't be an M, be an H in your marriage. So now let's jump into the marriage.
Overall, we were best friends, laughing, living life, loved each other, loved being together. And so we were like, oh, marriage is going to be a piece of cake, wonderful. And so also I was working full-time and was starting grad school. And Jeff still had one more year of college and baseball. And so it was kind of like we were in 2 different places too. Like you were still finishing up college and baseball, and so were my friends. And so that was kind of weird, but I was working full time and in grad school. So it was just weird dynamics, but we thought everything was going to be great. And let's just say this, the first week of marriage, okay, our honeymoon, we left a whole trunk of groceries in the car. That spoiled. Locked the keys in the car. So we had to get AAA to come unlock the door. And we got in a wreck on the last day of our honeymoon. So our first month of marriage, we were looking for a car, trying to deal with like insurance. And y'all know how fun that is. And then he also was starting a job, and some stuff happened with that where... I
was finishing a summer job.
And a lot went down with that job, dynamics of our marriage, the situation of, aftermath of a wreck, all of that. And so it was hard. We were like, what the heck? Why is the enemy attacking our marriage right now? We had been married a week at that point, but then, all this other stuff continued to happen really over the next 2 months. And I think that set the tone for the next 6 months of marriage for us. It was so bad, y'all. Like, we were not connected. Like, I literally remember he would walk in the house and I would just go, if you're watching the YouTube, you can see my face. Like, I would literally look at him with a blank stare, which is so
like,
flippin' rude. Yes. And just because that was our dynamic, and it was like, we just were struggling, and we're like, what is this marriage? Like, is this really what it's like? Because this kind of sucks, TBH. Like, we were besties, dating and engaged, and now this kind of sucks. How the heck? Like, I do not feel loved and cherished by you. You didn't feel respected by me, and it was just a whirlwind. Oh, and one story in particular that I can remember was, I think it was probably 6 months into marriage, my mom came to dinner at Coach's. If you live in West Point, you know that restaurant. And I laughed at something my mom said, and Jeff looked at me and he was like, I haven't seen you laugh in a while. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like, how embarrassing. I have been that just rude and down in the dumps that I'm not even laughing with my husband. And he said, wow, I haven't seen you laugh in a while. that was just kind of like embarrassing, but then also a wake up call of like, dang.
Thinking back on that, now you're saying that, I'm like, wow, that was like a passive aggressive like little jab there. But I remember that
I don't think you even meant it in a mean way.
Mean it to be passive aggressive.
I didn't receive it.
I legitimately, that was my feeling. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. I hadn't seen you laugh in a while. Thinking back, I'm like,
so
wow,
sad.
that was a very emotional response. Like that was a true emotion that came out. I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't seen you laugh in a while. But it sounds like I was being a savage, but I wasn't trying to be. So anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't receive it like you were trying to like give me a jab, but I mean, it just really was a wake up call to me to, wow, we are not doing so well in this marriage. I'm not even laughing.
Yeah.
And if you knew us dating and engaged, like that's all I did was laugh at you. Like I thought you were the funniest person on earth. Mm-hmm. And now I also think that now. But that little time I was like, nothing you say is funny. Nothing you say is...
Which if you know me, you know that's not true because I'm so funny.
Yeah, I mean, we laugh more now, so that's good. But
so one of the things that I think was, I know, was so pivotal on turning our marriage around, turning our lives around, was my fall of my senior year in college, and Alan Kemper, who is the owner of Lead Advisors and one of the hosts of the Four Fires podcast, he was my business professor at Point. And I had a class with him that fall called Organizational Leadership. And in that class, he shared the Four Fires with me and the few other people that were in the class. And I remember immediately thinking, oh, that's gold. Like, that Four Fire stuff, as soon as he said it, explained it to me, I was like, I want that, I need that. So Alan and I began our friendship. We started talking and hanging out right there in class. There was only a few of us in class, so there was time for us to connect one-on-one. And then we started getting lunch and hanging out outside of class. And through that class, we had to read books and give a presentation on a book. And Alan was so intentional with not just making us read some academic book that he chose. He wanted us to pick an area. He shared the Four Fires with us. He said, which area of your life do you want to improve? And I was like, my marriage. Ooh, pick me, my marriage.
Praise God.
So he said, hey, all right, well, here's a book. He gave me a couple different books, and I chose one called His Needs, Her Needs. And the book was all about the emotional needs of humans, and then they're broken up most of the time. 5 of them are feminine. There's a list of 10. Most of the time, 5 of them are masculine, and they don't have to be, but there's just his needs, her needs. There's majority of the time, men have a select few emotional needs, and women have opposite ones. So I read that book, and it was life-changing for me to understand, oh, yeah, yep, my wife and I are very different. God created us different. Our emotional needs are completely different.
And I remember him texting me at work, like, hey, here's a list of 10 emotional needs. What are your top ones? He was like, I have guesses for them, but you tell me which ones. And so I told him mine. He told me his. And then from there, really, because you read the book, you were starting to live into the Four Fires that you had heard about, and you started leading intentionally in first our marriage. You started, even when I was still blank face staring at you, like just being rude, you chose to like speak life into me and just really start leading and being a respectable man. And I saw that and was like, dang, like I really need to level up because he's starting to do all these things. Like, let me start living more intentionally. And so it was all because you identified, hey, what are her emotional needs? And you really started pouring into those needs that were mine. And that made me automatically just want to start pouring into yours as a byproduct of just the love that I was feeling from you. Mm-hmm.
So that is exactly what I was going to get into next, about what the big revelation I had from the Four Fires, thinking about, yeah, I'm the man of my house. I need to start becoming this 4-dimensional guy. And reading the His Needs, Her Needs book, I remember the revelation I had was this is what the Bible is talking about when it talks about in Ephesians 5 that the man is the head of the household. He's supposed to lead his wife and his kids and manage his household with competency and dignity. And I was like, oh, I want my emotional needs met. Rachel wants her emotional needs met. But I'm finding that when I don't meet hers, she doesn't meet mine. So I was like, oh, okay. So when God says that the man is the leader of the household, I realized the revelation that I had was I cannot expect Rachel to meet my emotional needs if I'm not meeting hers first. And so it's either a climb like this where I meet Rachel's and she's like, oh, I love him and I'm going to give him some respect, and it goes up, or man, Rachel hadn't made me feel respected today, so I'm not going to talk to her and meet her need of intimate conversation. And then she's like, oh, well, he's not talking to me. I'm not going to give him a kiss to meet his sexual fulfillment needs. And then it just spirals downward. And so I just realized that is what it means to be the man and to lead. It's dying. And so Ephesians 5 says, love and cherish your wife and give yourself up for her like Christ did the church. So I ignore, at least temporarily, all of my emotional needs, and I choose to meet yours. I'm not perfect, nobody is, but on a good day, I'm trying to meet your emotional needs first. And then what I found, men that are listening, is that my wife meets my emotional needs better than I could have asked her to when I'm meeting hers, because she, out of love and respect, wants to meet mine because I'm loving and cherishing her.
And I do want to honor and just give you a shout out that when you started leading, I just was like, oh my gosh, this is a man. Like, this is a respectable man who is going after what he wants. Like, he's respecting me, he's pouring into me. And I could see just this giant shift in your priorities. And so I just love you so much for that. And thank you, because we'd probably still be having a horrible marriage if it weren't for you being the first one to lead and change, because it wasn't me that made the shift, it was you. And so if you wouldn't have done that, I have no clue where we would be. So thank you for doing that. And I love you so much. You're so cute. Proverbs 12:4 says, a wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is decay to his bones. I'm like, dang, like that's kind of deep, but it's so true. Like, I don't want to be decay to your bones. What? Which is, I mean, a disgraceful wife, like, you know, that's what happens. And so I want to be a wife of noble character and be your crown. Like, I don't want to be, you're living intentionally. I don't want to be that person holding you back. Mm-hmm. I want to be your crown, your propeller. We're each other's propellers in life. And so I want to help you continue being this respectable man.
Right. And men, don't take that verse and say, man, my wife sure is nagging me to death. She's what is it? She's decay to my bones.
Decay to your bones.
Men, you have to make sure that you are doing the things that are respectable in order to expect respect from your wife.
That's a fact.
I can't be laying around like a bum all day, sleeping in until 9:30 in the morning, and not washing dishes and not helping and do anything, and just like, hey, you're supposed to respect me just because I'm your husband and I'm a man. That's not how it works. You have to do things that are respectable in order to receive respect from your wife. So
preach.
So going through the His Needs, Her Needs book and learning from Alan and beginning that mentorship and going through that class, Alan actually invited me to a Wild at Heart retreat. And so, men out there, if you've never read the book Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, I highly recommend that to every man, because that book talks about how boys have to have masculinity bestowed upon them from another man. It can't be from a woman. It has to be from another man. And how every man has a wound or multiple wounds that most of the time are caused by his father, whether the father was present or whether the father abandoned the man when he was young or whatever. We all have wounds, and it just really digs into understanding those wounds and getting freedom from those wounds. And for me, it helped me have grace towards the few wounds that my father gave me, because I was able to recognize how amazing my dad is. and how amazing he did raising me, I was able to find grace. So anyway, that's a great book. That was just a great retreat that Alan and I went on. Highly recommend The Wild at Heart to every man, because it really helps you understand yourself, because the question that the book talks about is every young boy has the question, am I a man, and do I have what it takes? And some boys grow up to be a boy with a beard and never really becomes a man, as far as his terminology is having masculinity bestowed upon you, where you are confident in the man you are. Some men never get that because they don't have their dad or some other male figure help them understand, no, I am a man, I have what it takes. And they spend their whole life being in insecurity and never getting the question answered, do I have what it takes? So they spend their whole life being arrogant or prideful or something like that. So just for me, understanding that dynamic of how a man operates, and knowing how important it is to have masculinity bestowed upon me, which I have. I'm so thankful that my dad did that for me. But then thinking about my nephews and other young boys that I see, and then one day our sons, being able to recognize that I don't need to pick on boys. Maybe a little bit. It's good to toughen somebody up a little bit. But I'm very cautious about saying anything that is like words of death. The Bible says the power of life and death is in the tongue. So that's a whole other topic, whole other podcast we can get into. But that was a really pivotal moment for me too, becoming this four-dimensional man, is understanding, oh, I'm a man. I have what it takes. I'm going to go do these things. And then also that fall, I had a dream one night. So this is a really cool part of our story. I had a dream one night that I was in the Commons area right there on the second floor in Point University, and me and all my teammates and friends would always hang out right there, and Alan's office was just right there on the side. And I had a dream that he came out and waved me into his office, and I walked in, and he offered me a job working for Lead Advisors. And I had that dream, kind of woke up, and like oftentimes all of us probably remember, you kind of have a dream, you remember it like, oh, that was an interesting dream, and then you kind of forget about it. 1 or 2 weeks later, I can't remember, I'm sitting in the Commons area.
Well, no, I think it was the next morning.
No, it wasn't the next morning. It was a little bit of time because I had forgotten about the dream.
Okay. So also one day, so about 2 weeks later, this same day that he's talking about, I woke up and was on my way to work, and I had this strong urge to pray for his job. And I was like, Lord, help Jeff to get the best job that he just loves and that he's truly fulfilled and that he wants to be at. And I just had this strong urge. It was the weirdest feeling ever, but I was like, okay, God, I'm going to pray for his job. Then I go to work, and then about 10 a.m. I get this phone call.
So we had been praying for months. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because I wanted to have a job that I was passionate about and that I could provide a good income for my family and provide for my family. So that morning, I go to class. After class, in between classes, I'm sitting in the Commons area hanging out with my buddies, and then I hear, hey, Jeff, and I'm like, what? And then I see Alan standing across the room waving at me, telling me to come to his office, and I didn't think anything of it. I stood up, and as soon as I started walking, the dream came back to me as clear as day, and
you knew what he was going to. It came back to
him, and I was like, every step I was like, there is no way that this is happening right now, that this dream is coming true. And I walked in, and sure enough, exactly the dream that I had came true. He asked me what I was doing in the spring. Told him I was playing baseball and trying to graduate as quickly as possible. And he was like, I want you to do an internship for me. Assuming the internship goes good, I want you to work for me in May once you graduate. And I was like, trying to act all cool. And I was like, oh, yeah, let me talk to my wife, and I'll get back to you. And internally, I was already screaming, yes, oh, my gosh, yes, I know that this is from God.
Doesn't Alan joke that this is the job of your dreams?
Right. So
literally.
I told Alan that one time, and he said, oh, so what you're telling me is this is your dream job, and you're telling me not to screw it up as your boss. And I was like, maybe.
Oh, my gosh.
So then I immediately was like freaking out. So I left Alan's office, and I called Rachel. So she was working in the admission office at Point at the time. I called her. I knew she was just downstairs, and I was like, "Can you talk right now?" And she was like, "Yeah." And then she walked out, and we met right in the hallway outside the admission office. And I was like welling up in tears, and I was like, "You're not going to believe what happened. Alan offered me a job, and I'm going to be planning these entrepreneur summits that he's been telling me about, and I'm going to be working at this awesome company." And we had this amazing moment, and Rachel said, "No way. I prayed that you were going to figure out what you did
that morning.
This morning, I prayed that." And that was just a really awesome story. One of those times where you're like, wow, this is 100% a God thing.
We were like, okay, well, the answer is yes, because this is wild and this is clearly from the Lord.
Yeah. And just a really cool story. I remember going out, calling my parents, immediately telling them, just so excited. And then moving on from there, I started living into the Four Fires because I knew that I was going to be working at Lead, and I knew that the Four Fires was how Lead operates, and that's how Alan and his executive coaches coach people with that framework. So in the spring, I did the first iteration of the 30-day Ruck. If you don't know what the 30-day Ruck is, that's a 30-day program that we run here at Lead. It's a 30-day challenge to live four-dimensionally. There's a bunch of tasks you commit to for 30 days. There's a handful of things that you commit to abstain from to avoid wasted time during the 30 days. And then there's a weekly meeting for you and the other men in your life that are going through the Ruck with you and your facilitator to check in for encouragement and accountability. You get a cool backpack when you sign up and all the resources. We equip you with everything that you'll need to be successful in accomplishing this 30-day challenge. So if you're interested in that, click the link in the description and go look at all of the months that we're offering the Ruck during the rest of this year, and sign up for a 30-day Ruck. It's a great first step in starting your four-dimensional journey. So I did a 30-day Ruck. It was the first iteration of it, so I kind of call it a half a Ruck because, one, I didn't really complete it, and it was still in the process of being built. But I did that, so I started reading books and being intentional in my friendships, which at that time were just basically non-existent. I just had a lot of surface-level acquaintances. I was already working out and stuff because of baseball, but really started pouring into my relationship with God and my marriage and my professional life because I knew that those things were things that had not yet been something I'd really poured into, at least recently. So I started living into, during the spring of 2021, the Four Fires, and then from then it kind of seems like it's been a gradual increase, kind of just like it's been up and down a little bit, but if you zoom out over the last 3 years, it's been kind of up and to the right, which is awesome. As far as my four-dimensional scores of just being intentional. And
so I would just like to say that I have seen you change so much in the past 3 years of marriage. Like since we were dating, engaged, and now married for almost 3 years, it has been insane to see the growth in you and just how you lead me and you. And how you lead other people, how you lead yourself, lead by example, is just so flippin' cool, seeing how much you've grown. And so Luke 2:52 says, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man." And I feel like that's what you've embodied, is you have grown in wisdom and in stature and favor among God and men. And that has been dang cool to see. And just watching you do it makes me just want to live into that. And I just want to encourage just all the women, even going back to being your husband's crown, not decay to their bones. I feel like he's my propeller, and I feel like I'm your propeller. And we just do that for each other. I heard this one girl, she said something about her husband's her push-up bra. I don't say that. We're just going to say propeller, but don't.
Hey, I'll be your push-up bra. Anytime.
You'll be my push-up bra. Okay. Yeah, but that's how you should be in a marriage, I feel like, is promoting each other, calling each other out and calling each other higher. And calling each other out, we call each other out. I mean, I've asked you, like, hey, what, am I not seeing something? Like, is there something in me that I need to change? Or you'll just point it out. And I'll be like, dang, that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. But like, you're right. Let me change that. And so don't get defensive. I know that our immediate reaction is to get defensive whenever our spouse calls us out about something, but they know us the best. And so we need to recognize that their feedback is something to take in consideration. So if our spouse is saying, hey, you probably should like work out more or be concerned about your health, don't just blow them off. Like their feedback is so valuable, probably the most valuable feedback you can get. Same thing if your spouse is like, hey, I'm trying to go this place with my finances, and you're really like spending all the money on Amazon or doing all this, and like that's not really helpful. Don't just blow them off about that. Be like, yes, how can I support you in our finances?
And never expect more from your spouse than you're willing to give. Don't say, hey, you probably should go work out if you don't work out yourself.
Do not do that.
So do not expect more from your spouse than you're willing to give.
Yes. And then whenever you get that feedback, seriously take it into consideration, because the feedback that you have given me is the best. And sometimes I get defensive about it, but then it's like, okay, well, why am I defensive about that? Let's both talk through the insecurity that I'm dealing with that made me feel that way. And then let me make that change, and vice versa. I might point something out in you, like, hey, Jeff, what you doing here, bud? And you might be defensive from some sort of insecurity. Well, let's talk about that. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Talk about it and then fix whatever it was that your spouse pointed out. Mm-hmm. I saw this one couple, and I described it this way to Jeff. I said, man, I feel like he is trying to take them places, and she is literally an anchor to his neck, pulling him down. Like he's trying to swim uphill, and he has this anchor just like sinking him down to the bottom. And don't be an anchor to your spouse. If your spouse is making those changes in their health, do not be the one to hold them back and be that old, like grandpa. So we want to be a propeller to our spouse, husband or wife, not an anchor. And one of my favorite examples of this was one of my nutrition coaching clients. She and her husband, they're wonderful. Their dynamic is so great. And she was on this fitness journey, and he knew about it. And she was, logging her food, trying to get awareness, getting in that protein, all the things. And she has 3 kids, and she's also a working mom. And so she was like getting food for the kids, breakfast ready. And her husband came up to her and said, hey, here's your plate. I've already tracked it in my FitnessPal, because that's what, we use for the program. I already have tracked it in my FitnessPal, and it meets your protein goal and calorie goal. Here you go. You don't have to worry about a thing. Eat it, and it's already tracked. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what a great example of being a propeller to your spouse in whatever area that it is that they're trying to level up in. So if your spouse is trying to level up in an area, finances, friendships, that's another one I'll just go ahead and talk about. Like if your spouse is seeking positive friendships, don't be like, oh, you don't want to hang out with me? Like let them go. I mean, if it is a bad friend,
not let them go.
No.
Encourage them.
Encourage them to go.
Yeah.
And also, if it is a bad friend, point it out. Mm-hmm. We are there, again, going back to the feedback thing. Like we value each other's feedback. And so if it's not a friend that is helping them grow as a human being, point it out. Hey, I don't think this person is bad for you. And the spouse, don't be defensive about it. Mm-hmm. They just value their feedback and what they're giving you. But for the positive friendships, encourage those. We want those to flourish and to prosper, and don't be jealous of those or anything like that. So encourage them in all the areas that they're really trying to level up in, and also look at those same areas and say, dang, they're kind of crushing it in that area. Where can I crush it in that same area based on them leading by example. And you've done that time and time again in our marriage. So appreciate you a lot. And just led by example in so many areas, and that's pushed me. And you've been a propeller for me to grow in those areas as well.
Another giant thing that has really helped us, I mentioned this at the beginning of this podcast, was us making our marriage into the healthy marriage that we want it to be, and we're always trying to make it better and better, is seeking wise counsel and joining small groups in our church. And we have two couples. We can give them a little shout out: Jack and Terry Rubio and Rex and Lisa Davis. They've been
shout out the best.
They're two couples that have been have much more life and marriage experience than us, and they have really poured into us. And so, if you're out there and you are trying to improve some area of your life, get a call it a mentor. Get someone that is older than you, that has more experience than you, that you respect. And don't just because they're older than you doesn't mean they're going to be a good mentor. Find someone that you respect and honor based on the example that you see them living in whatever area that it is, and ask them to counsel you and seek wise advice from them, because those two couples have really helped us be able to. I think it's helped us to mature at 24 years old, to think about certain things in our relationship by like taking a step back and actually thinking about, rarely is the issue. So rather than me just being upset about the issue that's right here in front of us, I'm able, because I get this advice, hey, I got this wise advice, rarely is the issue. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So whenever I have something that's in front of me that I'm really upset about, I take a step back and I think, and I'm like, what is the root cause to why this emotional whatever has happened? So I just can't encourage enough to get in small groups and seek wise counsel, because it has helped us at 24 years old, I think, at least I think, start down this path of growing in wisdom and stature.
Yeah, and I've even reached out to my women mentor, and I will literally tell them, rip me to shreds. Tell me, I've said those words, rip me to shreds. Tell me what I'm not seeing, because I don't want to be living just with this blind spot, and I want them to point it out to me, and I want to make changes on those immediately. And so don't be afraid to ask them to point those out.
Yeah.
Because when they do, you're going to grow as a person, and it's okay to swallow your pride sometimes and change something. If you want changes, make the changes. Swallow your pride and do it.
Yeah.
And I know you remember this, but time before last, we called one of the couples. They gave us feedback that I didn't want. I was like, dang it. I did not. That's the thing I didn't want them to tell me. Are you kidding me? But you know what? I swallowed my dang pride, and I followed their advice. And even though it was hard, I did what they advised me to do, even though it wasn't what I wanted to hear. And I grew from it. And I was like,
that's really,
yeah, looking back now, I'm like, yeah, y'all were right. If I would have done what I wanted, it would have been a trash situation.
That's a really good point, because the point is that what I just heard you say is, don't just seek advice from people that you know are going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, and even, I love it. I will say this. I mean, I know we're talking about mentors, but you calling me out, sometimes if I'm just in a negative mood and we're in the car and I'm stressed, you're like, hey, you have been saying negative things this entire car ride. Can you not? And then I'm like, you're right. Why am I acting like this? Goodness. And so that really helps me, instead of being like, no, I'm not. Okay, yeah, I am. Let me calm down and change my attitude. So I appreciate you when you call me out on things like that.
And you have to do it in a loving way. My intent is not to say anything to you in that time of calling you out. It's not criticizing you. He's
calling me out and calling me higher.
Yes. That's exactly
not
right.
criticizing. And I'm always thankful when you bring me back to reality. And then also I would say apologize more in your marriage. Say I'm sorry for the things that I've done. Be specific and apologize and be like, yeah, I've been an anchor to you. You have been crushing it on the budget game and I've been spending money left and right. I'm sorry. You have been crushing it on going up to the gym and I'm sorry for making you feel like that was an inconvenience for me to eat healthy or exercise. I'm sorry, and I'm going to start supporting you and being your propeller in those areas. Or I'm sorry if I haven't been supportive of your healthy friendships. I want you to go have those friendships because I know they're refining you and sharpening you and pruning you to make you even a better husband. So like, let me get out of the way. I'm holding you back. So apologize whenever your spouse is leveling up in a marriage and you're being an anchor, and pivot and just be a propeller. Apologize and start making those changes because your spouse will be forever grateful, like I am towards Jeff, on being that propeller for me.
Yeah.
And now I get to be that propeller for him. I try to.
Yeah.
Overall, I guess my biggest thing is like being each other's propeller has been the biggest impact in our marriage and in the growth over the past 3 years of marriage. And I really appreciate you and everything that you have called me out and called me higher in. And thank you for doing that. Even when I'm rude and mean sometimes, I really deeply appreciate it. And I just love being married to you. And we're best friends.
The thing that propelled us into becoming a propeller for each other was actually a small group that we joined called Freedom. We've actually gone through it twice now. We attended the first small group, and then we co-led with Jack and Terry Rubio the second time we went through. And the whole Freedom curriculum, it's a small group curriculum, and it's all about living in the tree of life. So it shares the story of the Garden of Eden and how Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan to eat from the tree that God commanded them not to. We know that that tree was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so in our lives, when we're behaving in a way where we're bitter or we're just overall grumpy or speaking, call them words of death over other people, and you're just grouchy about life, that's living in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But the other tree that that Genesis talks about is the tree of life. And that is where you're doing quite the opposite. You're speaking words of life over people, and you're encouraging people. You're speaking words of life to yourself. And anyway, that whole Freedom curriculum, that whole idea of living in the tree of life is what kind of fanned the flame or propelled us to become a propeller for each other, because we went through that small group. We have that common lingo, like, hey, I think you've swung over to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You need to get back to the tree of life. And so we can't.
That's the Christian way to say your attitude sucks right now.
Yeah, that's right. So we can't recommend that Freedom content highly enough. And that really helps us, because my self-talk when we first got married was horrific. I was telling myself that I was inadequate. I was just not as good at everybody around me was just better at everything, and that I was basically a loser. Like, that's what I was telling myself. Like, I'll never make a lot of money. I'll never be successful. I'll never be really great. I'll never be a professional at whatever it is that I do. I'll always be mediocre. And Rachel, of course, was my greatest helper in that. She was like, my husband is not that. And then through her calling me out on that, and then going through the Freedom content, really helped me see that's not what God tells me about myself. I am a son of God, and He calls me. He wants me to be free. He wants me to be. He wants me in terms of all the four fires. He wants me to be strong. The book of James tells us that we need to be whole and complete, lacking nothing. Well, being inadequate and feeling inadequate, feeling like a loser, is not being whole or complete and lacking nothing. So you're not going to become that whole or complete lacking nothing man. In my eyes, it's the 4-dimensional man without a lot of intentional work. But that whole idea of living in the tree of life and speaking words of life to your spouse is so important in marriage. We talked a little bit about positive withholds and having 2 positive things to say, 2 plus positive things to say for every negative thing you'd like to say to your spouse. The attitude is to make the marriage better, but you still should be saying more positive things to your spouse than you do negative. But man, the power of life and death is in the tongue, and our words, my words, can absolutely devastate you, and the same for me. Your words can absolutely devastate me and make me. We talked about being best friends with your spouse. If you're always critiquing me, or I'm always critiquing you and speaking words of death over you, you're not going to want to hang out with me. You're not going to want to be friends with me. So if you really love your spouse, you really value your marriage, you want to have a strong marriage, why would you always nag and complain to your spouse or about your spouse to them? Speak words of life and be a propeller. Lift each other up.
And you and I even get kind of unhinged. Like whenever we'll be in a room and someone will say something that's just so negative, or being passive aggressive, or just saying that even the self-talk, like, oh, I'm so fat, or oh, I'm so stupid, or I'm so dumb.
I'm like, whoa,
we
don't
get
say
so
that. Yeah.
Jeff and I we'll be in a room and someone will say something that's just tree of knowledge of good and evil, not tree of life.
Yeah.
And we are like, it's like a spark. We're like, or it like strikes us so hard. We'll make dead eye contact and be like, whoa, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that they're like even putting that out into the air for Satan to grab a hold of. Yeah. And so, but that's what we did for so long, you know, the self-talk and to each other, that now we are just like, literally it strikes a chord in us whenever we see it. And even earlier today, a situation happened where someone spoke a word of death, and we said, we rebuke that in Jesus' name. You ain't saying that. Like, Jeff and I are kind of a team on that, of not letting people speak death over each other or situations or themselves. Like, it strikes a nerve now, which I'm glad, because it helps encourage other people and each other. Yeah.
On that note, another piece of advice that I think is very valuable, that I'm thankful that I always heard it from my parents, and I recognized it soon into our marriage, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I'm never doing that again. And so what that thing is joking about or talking about, even in a joking manner, divorce. About a month or two, I don't know, a couple months into our marriage, I'd gone home, and I had made a joking comment. I probably can't come home next weekend, home to my parents' house. I'm like, probably not coming back next weekend. If I do, Rachel will probably divorce me. Ha, ha, ha. I kind of laughed about it. And I remember leaving, and I just thought, like, why am I joking about getting a divorce? And immediately I went home that night, and I was like, hey, Rachel, I told Rachel, I joked about you're going to divorce me. If I was like, I'm giving you my word that I will never joke about divorce again, because I know that things are a slow fade. So you joke about divorce, and then you get into a fight, and then you say, just like it's a slow fade over time, where it started as a joke about divorce, and then 10 years later, you're actually getting a divorce because it's been 10 years of slowly joking about it, saying it, thinking about it, and then over time, it becomes a thing that you're actually considering because it's just been a slow fade over time.
And take inventory of who you're surrounding yourself with. Are the people you're surrounding yourself with joking about divorce, or slandering their husband, or joking about their husband, or belittling? Like, I'm trying to make you bigger, not belittle you and make you smaller. And so even in public, when you're not around, like, take inventory of who you hang around. If you're hanging around couples who are on the brink and like struggling, I mean, there's always those couples that you can, pour into and reach out to, but those should not be your main people that you're hanging out with. Hang out with people who have thriving marriages, who talk well of their spouse, who honor their spouse, who respect their spouse, and you'll start doing that same thing. So just be very mindful, because being surrounded by people who have sucky relationships, like that's gonna pour into you. And then another thing I would say, which more recently, probably the past 6 months, I've been listening to podcasts of women, and it's stuff I'm interested in. It's like health and life and marriage, but they all have great marriages. And so I hear the way, even when their spouse comes on, like they're both talking well about each other. And just listening to podcasts of healthy marriages has been something I've done recently, and that's kind of been like, oh,
Yeah.
It's helped me a lot, I think, and given me new perspectives on things. So even take inventory of what you're listening to, in terms of how they talk about their spouse, or books you're reading, or whatever it may be.
What you put in is what you will get out.
That's a fact.
The mouth
Don't
speaks,
play with it.
The mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So consume good content, and that's what you'll get out. One last thing that I want to talk about that has helped me on my 4-dimensional journey, and then specifically in my marriage, and it is thinking about doing something every single day, at least one thing in each of your 4 fires. One of the resources that the 4 Fires nonprofit has is, we call it the 4 Fires Daily Planner.
And I think that book is the coolest. Like, I literally told Jeff a few weeks ago, I was like, can I have one? Like, how cool.
Yeah. So the 4 Fires Daily Planner, if you're watching the video, it has a card on there. So you have each of your 4 fires, and every single day there's a scripture or a question or a challenge at the top of the page, and a little spot for you to write a verse of the day from your quiet time. But you have purpose, people, professional, physical, and you write out a handful of things. If you just did one thing in each of your 4 fires for the next 20 years, how much more 4-dimensional would you be at 20 years than you are today? Just one thing. If it's sending your spouse a out of the ordinary reason that you love them text, that's building your people fire. If you don't work out, start working out, or just start today by doing 100 push-ups.
Or 10.
I mean...
or 1.
Well,
like
100... yeah. Do 100 over the course of the day. I mean, professionally, start reading a book, but if you just did something in each of your 4 fires every single day, every single morning I get here to the office, and I write my date, I have a quiet time, I write a verse of the day, and then I write out at least one thing. Sometimes I got the whole page is full. But I write out at least one thing in each of the 4 fires. I'm going to do this today, and it can be the most simple thing, but just something that you're intentionally saying, yeah, that would help build a friendship or a relationship with my wife, or but just doing something intentional. This planner, this 4 Fires Daily Planner, is just it's a resource that we designed to help people. It's helping me be intentional. You write things down, you're more likely to do them, and so that's probably my greatest advice to why our marriage has gotten better and why I've seen success in the 4-dimensional world. I've done 4 30-day rucks, and so I've been really intense at times where I'm doing way more than one thing in each fire per day in the rucks. But over the course, like if you looked at over the last 3 years, it's turned into me doing at least one thing every single day. In each fire, and yeah, like there might be a day where maybe I didn't hit one of the fires like super hard, but at least I'm thinking about it. Like I know I need to do something in this area. I'm not like, you're not going to crush it every single day, but that's probably my greatest advice is think about doing one thing in each of the 4 fires every single day, and your life and your marriage is going to get better. And if any of you listening is interested in getting a 4 Fires Daily, send an email to info@4-fires.com, and the 4 Fires nonprofit would love to provide you with that resource and get in contact with you and get you the things that you need to take your next steps on your 4-dimensional journey.
And if you're a man not living into this currently, that's okay, but let's start doing it. And because I told this to Jeff one time, I was like, a 4-dimensional man is sexy as heck. Like, if you, especially single guys out there, I'm just saying, you're going to be way more attractive to a woman when you are living into the 4 fires by crushing it in your physical health, by reading the Bible, the Word of God, and being a godly man. Having great friendships, and professional fire, crushing it with professional fire. I'm just saying, you're going to attract the right woman. Also, you're going to be a more respected man because you're more respectable towards your spouse or your wife right now, and you're going to change your marriage right now if you start living into it. But then also, if you're single, like, you're going to attract a pretty, like maybe a 4-dimensional woman, who knows? But you got a better chance at it if you live into this. And so you're a lot more attractive as a husband because you're living into this. And I appreciate you for everything.
That's a good point on the preparing yourself for your spouse. I mentioned don't expect any more than you're willing to give, but a story I heard about that is, don't seek to catch the biggest fish in the sea. Seek to make yourself the best bait, and you're gonna.
That's good.
And you're gonna attract the best fish in the sea.
Yeah.
Or the biggest fish in the sea.
And don't be embarrassed to make these changes. Sometimes I know our pride can get in the way, and we're like, well, this is just the way I am, or whatever it may be. No, it's not. You need to calm down and make the changes. Don't be embarrassed. Yeah, people are going to see you showing up in a different way. Freaking own it. Own the changes that you're making because it's worth it.
Yep.
So,
that was
a little tangent there. Got a little intense. But I'm serious.
If you don't love your life and you're not happy with the trajectory you're taking, change. We have the power of choice.
Lay down your pride.
Change. And like I said, though, it's something every single day. I think people get scared about change because they're like, oh, I got to change my whole life in one day. Start with something small and make changes over time by doing something every single day. You got anything else you want to add?
That sums it up. I could probably keep talking for 4 hours, so we might as well just...
No, not you.
We might as well just end it right here.
All right. Well, Rachel, I always enjoy getting to talk with you. And guys, I hope this was encouraging. We've been married for almost 3 years, and we are very excited to continue to learn. If you guys have great marriage advice, share it with us.
Send it our way, please.
Send it
We're sponges.
info@4-fires.com. Comment in the comment section below. Send us a DM on social media. We want, Rachel and I, us personally, we want to continue to put as much wisdom as we can into our brains and into our marriage. So if you guys have awesome stuff you'd like to share, please share it. And if this was helpful to you, let us know in the comment section that you enjoyed it. Let us know what stuck out to you more. And with that being said, guys, thanks for listening, and remember to live intentionally. We'll catch you on the next episode of the 4 Fires Podcast.